Hi, I've known Rich and Nancy for many, many years. Nancy, I first met when she was working for us on one of our first films as our POC, which, as you know, means Pregnant Office Coordinator. She had produced their first child at this point. And I remember being in an airplane flying out here, and they had given me the script for this movie. And reading it, I just said, I want to see this. They hadn't made a movie at that point. I had not seen Nancy's NYU short, but she was the person who put me on to Chris Cooper, who had been in her NYU short, and so we read him for Make One. And like a lot of first films, this is kind of a miracle. And we'll talk a little later with Rich and Nancy about how it actually got made. Here's Nancy.
Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you, American Cinematheque. Thank you, Imani Davis. Thank you, everyone who works here, because I feel now, with having been here for quite some time, it feels, that you all love film, love the experience, and are the carekeepers of this medium that we want to keep alive and have people enjoy. Sitting in a room with a bunch of strangers having an experience, there's nothing like it, right? I want to thank you for seeing my first film. My dad, when I told him I wanted to go to film school, first he said, "What kind of woman goes to film school?" He was just selling. And then the second thing he says, "You don't know nobody. You're not going to make it in this business. We have 0 people we know." What he did not know is that the first film that I would work on was called A Brother from Another Planet. And I would meet John Sayles and Maggie Renzi and take this journey with a lot of their advice along the way. So Rich and I are eternally grateful. I hope you enjoyed this first film, and we look forward to speaking about this with you and telling you all about what went into it. Thank you.
Waiting for the mic's on. Nancy, how many weeks did you have to shoot this?
Oh, ask Rich. I don't know. I blocked it out of my mind.
Well, the AT was lousy. That was me. So the initial schedule was, I think, 36, but we took a lot longer. We took 40 or 50.
Did you have to come back and shoot stuff, or did you just shoot straight and just tell everybody we're not done yet?
We just shot straight, and some crew had to leave, but the only thing we came back to shoot was a big discussion between Nancy and I, and that was the scene in the catering hall where they talk about blue mashed potatoes. And that was like, come on, we don't need that. But Nancy said,
Yeah, well, it was good. So I remember Marianne Leone, who's in the movie, and Maggie Renzi, cooking for, you did a 10-minute reel or something like that to try to raise money. And so it was like a 2-day shoot with most of the actors, but not all of the actors who eventually would be in it. And that led to anything?
Well, yeah, I mean, what happened was the script kept going out, in self-addressed stamped envelopes back in the day. And, you could paper the walls with the rejection letters. People were just, nobody was in it. We didn't have any actors that were known. And so in order to figure out how is it that we could put this out so people can see the potential in this movie, that's when we said, okay, let's take the first, I think, 12 pages, basically, and refashion like a trailer, but it wasn't really a trailer, it was longer than that, it was like 10 minutes. And just to shoot that, because we had enough money to shoot that, and we cast it. And some of our actors we did keep, and some actors we
I was going to say that the best thing that came from that trailer is Annabella Sciorra walked in the door from an backstage.
Yeah.
So,
And was that a casting? I mean, Annabella had, I think she did one movie before this in a smaller
she did
part.
The Fortunate Pilgrim, the Mario Puzo novel before The Godfather.
Right, but she hadn't been cast at that
and that was
point.
like a TV movie. So that was the first time she was on screen, but for the majority of the actors you see here, they were all theater because we couldn't work with SAG. So for most of them, it was their first time on a movie set. So I remember as each day came out, you see how big the cast is. Every time, like, you know, I had new actors for the day, I'm like, oh, right, I gotta tell them, you know, like, here's your mark, you know, there's the light, there's the camera, you know, and like, it was like every day someone new was learning.
And that they didn't have to worry about facing the audience
Right. Projecting.
on the stage.
Yeah.
Did
Although, you know, in Italian, you do project. They're next to each other.
did the woman who played the bridesmaids ask to keep their gowns?
Wow, I don't, you know, those would be
Those were,
pretty
those were
trendy today.
promoted, so no, nobody
Yeah.
kept anything.
Giant shoulders, no.
Okay. I also remember you guys going to a couple of the wedding services and them giving you videos and things like that, so that you knew kind of this is what a wedding in that neighborhood would be like.
Oh, I mean, we lived it. So we used to go, like, you know, my family, there were a million weddings, like that one, Hey Kumare, that was my cousin's wedding. They played that song there. Blue Mashed Potatoes was my girlfriend's wedding. She did have that. So it was like being Margaret Mead, you know. And what was interesting is I teach a lot, and I often say, I once had a girl who had a problem with the script, and she said, this is based on my family, and I'm really having a hard time. I don't want anybody to know that I'm doing this. And I said, the answer to that is you become Margaret Mead, and you start analyzing, start being curious about something you think you know everything about, because you don't, and approach it that way. And then you take all the characters that you have in your script that are based on real people, and if you have a prototype, make sure you have like 5 prototypes and interview everybody, and then just mix it all up. And then you have these composite characters, and nobody will hate you after or everybody will see themselves in you.
And in fact, the idea for the movie started with that last scene, which is based loosely on fact. We went to a wedding where that happened, and we got out of there and said, wow, how did that happen?
And I was a bridesmaid in the back.
Who were these people?
And you know, shooting it, how did you get a crew together? Were there people you knew from film school, or people who had been recommended?
A combination. I mean, what was great about that, we did know people that we'd worked from even the Student Films Day that stayed with us. And then, you know, our editor, John Tintori, came because I met him on Brother from Another Planet.
Mm-hmm.
And then...
Where he been a grip?
Was it?
Where he was a grip.
Yes. And then he moved on being an editor, and then he hired me to be his assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we decided to do the short 10-minute film, it was while I was working as his assistant, so we shot the film over a weekend, and then I had all this footage, and he agreed. He said, I'll cut it for you. So during the day I was his assistant, and at night I was his director, and he was my editor. So it was like really cool.
How much had you worked with actors before?
In Philly, what happened is that before I went to NYU, I was at Queens College for 2 years because I couldn't figure out how to afford, you know, a film school. And every time, they did have a film program, but it was overcrowded. So every time I got shut out, I often got shut out of the production classes. I would go and take a class of something that kind of interested me. So I would get shut out, I'd go take a psychology class. I'd get shut out again, I'd go to theater and take an acting class, get shut out again, playwriting. And all those, the rebound classes that I took actually informed everything I did. And I learned to work with actors because I was one, even though I'm not an actress, I was one in the theater classes.
Yeah. So, you know, there's some of the people that you know, I recognize from later movies who are older actors. If you weren't working SAG, they had to be people who had not been in movies before, probably in New York. So who did you cast with?
We had a series of casting directors because we really struggled with the casting because of our very specific needs. And there was a lot of times where we couldn't find certain characters, so we burned through.
I think we had 3 different.
They were all wonderful.
And a part of the burn through was that there was very little
money.
or no money.
Yeah.
I
I think it was no, as I remember.
it was pretty much a no on the money thing, and you know that's how we financed the movie. I mean, I will say John through, you know, kept telling us, you know, make this for no money, make this for no money, and so. Being the accountant that I was at the time, I said, well, the first thing to do is cut the above the line off completely. cut off the head, and so there was no
The
cast.
line meaning.
Above the line, meaning cast, director, producer, writer, nobody got paid. So that was, that's sort of set the parameters for the cast, yeah.
But what you're offering everybody, right, is this opportunity,
Right.
and then that, and
Theoretically.
it worked.
Yeah.
It worked.
Yeah,
It
this
worked
one
like
worked.
everybody that started all their careers.
You had, I never like to call them non-actors, you had a lot of new actors to work with as well, which is a different challenge. I mean, you're talking about people as human beings, but you're asking them to do something they might not do. They probably have done it, but they might not be able to do it again because now they know there's a camera pointing at them. How is that working with them?
A lot of time, a lot of the older actors, the adults, were trained, whether it was theater, local dinner theater, or wherever, and most of the non-trained actors were the little people, so the kids. So, and that basically, like, the little boy who doesn't want to go to the bathroom in the girls' bathroom at the very end, well, I'm sure that's a situation he knew. So I put him with his mother, so that if she dragged him, he wouldn't get freaked out. It was his mother dragging him. And then the little girl, for example, that's the niece, the morning that Michael is hungover and he wants to throw up, and the little niece is bothering him and does a call, she kept looking at the camera. So I'm lying down on the floor up by the bed and looking up at her, so that when she looks down at me and says her line, looking at me for approval, because that's all she did, then it looked like she's looking at Michael. So you just have to get very creative and figure out how to make people look really good, their best.
Yeah, animal trainers do that. They're just off screen. So this movie won at Cannes, at Sundance, and then it got a distribution. Who was that?
MGM.
Uh,
MGM bought it.
do they know they own this movie?
Well, there's a reason why it's our print that you're watching.
Yeah.
Because they were a little hard to get a hold of. They're busy.
And they bought it there, and did you feel like they knew what to do with it once they had it?
But let's back up to why we said yes to MGM, because we did have a lot of excitement around the film. We were in shock. Like we had just put together this movie. We didn't know what was going on with it, and it was actually you, John, who said to us right as we were finishing it up, and we had a temp music track and everything.
Yeah.
And you said, check eligibility dates. Like you should really get into that festival that's in Utah. And I
United
said,
States Film
and it was called the United States Film
Yeah, it
Festival.
was very good.
And I was like, oh, okay. And that was the year that the United States Film Festival became Sundance, and we were just positioned. It was us, it was Soderbergh, and it was Michael Moore that year. So it was like this thing happened, and Hollywood showed up in Utah. And actually, we weren't even there because I was giving birth to Kenny.
Right.
I was in labor when we won. So I was in the Bronx, and the film was in Utah. And so that really we were in this huge, caught a wave.
Mhm.
But and truthfully, it was really something to have this little movie that we made in the neighborhood with the lion at the head, or we sold it to a studio.
Also, that was
And
the
they gave
one
us the most
place.
money.
But not all, well, yes, which we felt super obliged
Obliged
to our investors to get their money back. But even more importantly, I have to say, selfishly, they didn't want to change the ending.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
Remember,
the other distributors wanted
including
to.
Miramax, wanted to change the ending, and
Yeah.
I'm not I forget.
The other offers were that they would screen it, test screenings, and that they wanted to be able to change the ending. They were worried that the ending was
a downer.
Downer. And that's right, MGM said no changes.
Yeah, well, Miramax changed almost everything.
Yeah.
Usually about 5 to 10 minutes shorter. So once it came out, or just before it came out, did you have a cast and crew kind of screening in the neighborhood? Or did you not have time for that?
No, we did. We actually screened it, Nancy. Remember, we screened it at the Whitestone,
That's right.
at a neighborhood theater. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and
Which
everybody.
was great.
It was great. It was really a big family affair. All those actors, there was so much improvisation. I mean, definitely wrote a script, and it's definitely the story we wrote, and the dialogue pretty much is a dialogue, but around each line of dialogue, all these actors danced around it and brought, and like say the morning of the wedding when everybody's saying, she's wearing the Jesus thing again, that's Mary Leone bringing in her family stories.
Yeah.
Or Marie DeChico, don't sit Diddy and Scabby next to each other. You know, you don't remember the Capitol problem? No, don't put it there. So all these were not in the script, so they would bring their.
Yeah, it's a lot of why you feel like you're really there in the movie. It has that density of, people are having their lives. They've seen kids get married before. They're a nice couple.
Yeah, right. Moving along. Folks.
Yeah,
Just
we've got other things to
along.
do. So let's open it up for questions, if anybody has any. Producer questions, director questions, writer questions. Rich and Nancy wrote it together.
Yeah.
So I really like the scene that happened between, I forget the female lead's name, but her and her mom when she was in hospital.
Oh, okay.
I thought that was really cute. So maybe we could talk about
The scene between Donna and her mother,
that. Yes.
when she comes home and she gives her the nightgown.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the things that was important for me, like in sort of seeing how these scenes would play together, is that there was an emotional roller coaster. That one moment, people would be fighting, and then the next moment there was calmness, and someone was playing a romantic song, and you would have that yearning of wishing that perfection would happen. Yeah, we were very young when we wrote the script, by the way. We got married when we were 21. So, and this wedding happened around that time. So we were super young. And some people were not very clear on what their future was going to look like when they made this step. So that kind of scene for me was sort of a contrast, because I think there's a fight right before it. And then she comes in, and like everything's like quiet, and there's like, I'll be loud, please, and and mom is like getting ready for the wedding. She's just happy. And that's the problem, right? Like you have these problems, and then there's that public face or that family face you have to put up, like everything's good, but it's not.
It's just a question, a technical question about the acting. Annabella is so good and throws herself into it so much. For take two on those emotional scenes, how long did it take her to get back to, I can do it again?
I'm very protective, and I think even though this was like my first feature, I kind of knew that from even film school or whatever, that you really have to protect your actors, because the minute you say cut to go to a second take, the lights get fixed and the thing, and makeup and hair comes in, all this stuff. And if it was a very emotional scene, I would get a little badass about like saying leave her alone, like leave her alone, try to keep her in that place, because it's hard and painful.
Yeah.
So the best we could, we did.
You take a little bit of time and keep people quiet.
And keep them quiet.
Yeah.
People always, I wouldn't ask people, like at that point we were such a young crew, sometimes they'd say like, get that crew member out, put them outside, because I can hear, we're like so focused in this inner circle right by the camera.
You also did a lot of scenes, a lot of her emotional scenes without cutting away. So she got to do the whole scene.
Yes.
And you weren't, say, oh, let's do 3 lines in it here or 3 lines in it there.
Oh yeah, no, giving her the ability to ramp up, get to speed, have the thing, and then leave. And out in the cutting room we could have cut away if we needed to, but we knew when things were working, and it was just me and John and Tori sitting here saying, okay, like that's got to just leave her alone,
How many days in did you say, oh my God, we cast the right people?
Well, with her, it was like back in that little short piece that we did, because she blew me away. And I started with a picture, which is weird. Her headshot, usually, you don't know much, but there was an intensity in her eyes. And then I said, I have to meet her. When she walked in, I went, it's only happened to me like a couple of times in my career, but it was like, oh, like, we don't need to see anybody else.
Yeah.
And then you just hope that they say yes, because
Yeah.
you don't want to see anybody else.
That happened to me. Carmen Kasama showed me just some video she'd shot of people who came in to read for Girl Fight. And it was just Michelle Rodriguez shadowboxing. And I said, well, that's who you're going to cast.
That's her, yeah.
Sometimes
she
you get
was
lucky.
brilliantly cast. Yes.
Anybody else?
What about everyone out there?
Wow.
Sort of the opposite end. So Annabella we found 2 years before we started shooting, and Ronaldo we found, am I saying 2 weeks before? I swear, it was so close to shooting.
We were having such a hard time finding the Michael that Nancy wanted that we actually pushed shooting 2 weeks. So it wasn't very long. It was very close to.
And it's interesting,
He was the last
looking
one that
back
we saw.
on it, why we couldn't find him was because we were non-union, non-SAG. And if you were of that age, Italian-American boy, you
You were working.
you were getting picked up like this and you were working. So we couldn't find people who were not, and it just so happened, I mean, Ron was just on the edge and we caught him before.
There's also the difficulty is that, as written, he's such a gavone, he's such an asshole. Yeah, to play a guy and have you still like him and hope for them
Yeah.
to stay together,
Yeah.
you gotta find a special
Yeah,
guy.
and that was the thing, is like, I had to keep it was kind of brutal, the casting sessions for Michael, because, sometimes an actor comes in and they want to give you what's on paper, and what I wanted was complexity, so I'll never let somebody go if they just, they come in with their take, and I respect that, but then I want to find out, can you get closer to what I want? And they're not mind readers, I gotta tell them what it is, so I will work with every actor, if I think there's some potential in there, and then so I was working with all these guys, guy after guy, to see, okay, does he have it in him? Because, as you say, on paper, it looked like he was a jerk, and he was so complicated.
And this is back when you got to cast people and be in the same room with them. Unlike today when,
I am fighting that, we've got to keep that going. For actors, for directors, we have to have that going, that's so important.
Anybody else?
I have a question about the locations, because they're phenomenal. And did you use just generally practical sets and apartments and all
Yeah.
that?
Morris Park, Bronx, New York.
Yeah.
So the
The
people's
only-
homes?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the only thing we built was the bathroom set, because the bathroom we
okay.
couldn't, we would be in there a long time, and, to control it wouldn't have been very practical you usually have to build bathrooms.
I've got one.
Anybody?
Yeah, I'm curious about the real wedding in which you were a bridesmaid and you witnessed that kind of a fight after a wedding. Do you remember what ended up happening in that relationship 30-some years later with that real couple?
Are Brad and Angelina still together?
It's funny, I just want to say that couple, because I sort of strayed from them, that I don't know, because I strayed from them so much that it's not the same couple. But I can tell you that we fit the statistics of the time, because we all got married the same year, and half of us divorced and half of us have stayed together. So it's definitely was rough going, especially for young people.
Yeah, what struck me about it the first time I read it and then saw it, which was my own experience growing up in Italian neighborhoods and going to a very mixed school, and, was how tribal the boys and girls were. That, yeah, they're interested in each other, but they're basically separate tribes. And to a certain extent, if you look at their parents' generation and the other guys, they're still that way. Obviously her parents have a nice relationship, but they kind of, well, he's a guy, he's a good guy, I got lucky. But you don't figure that they do everything together or whatever. They hang out with their boyfriends and they hang out with the girlfriends.
Get him out of the house, I can't take him. You used to hear that. But yeah, and it's like this segregated world, which again was very interesting. But by the way, when we were writing, sometimes I would take the boy scenes first and he would take the girl scenes first, just for fun.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting because we got a lot of good stuff out of that, because sometimes we observe the other gender,
Rich, what were your days as a producer like? Just kind of looking at the budget and looking at what you got shot that day. It sounds like you got behind fairly easily.
I got behind pretty early and stayed behind. It was a challenge. It's a big movie. I mean, that wedding alone was originally, I think, scheduled for 2 days or 3 days, and it just there are several movements in there and multiple live music performances, all kinds of complexities that I wasn't really prepared for as an AD. So my days producing were totally wrapped up as being the AD, and my partner, Shelley Weiss, kind of kept saying, we're gonna,
Cool.
It's like basically we had to raise a little bit more money to finish it when we got through shooting, and then we had to raise more.
Also, I think one of the things that is that you learn with every movie, and this was the first feature. So John Tintori reminded us that in the cutting room, I forgot this, in the cutting room, the first 12 scenes were the scenes we had shot for the little 10-minute piece, and then I shot the feature version of it. And we sat in the cutting room and said, the movie doesn't start till scene 13. And we just cut all those scenes away.
Yeah.
So it's and I didn't know that. If I had known that, how many days could we have saved for the schedule? I didn't know that. It was, it was very literal. I said, it's in the script, we gotta keep it.
Yeah.
So now, today, I'm like the queen
Plus
of like,
yeah.
that's not gonna work. That's gonna end up
Yeah.
in the cutting room, but that's like just years of experience.
Yeah.
But when you're first starting out, you don't know.
Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
The acting is so uniformly naturalistic. I was just so impressed. Did you have long rehearsal periods prior to shooting?
Yes, we did. We had the ladies.
With Annabella, we had 2 years.
Well, with Annabelle, right? But before I answer that question, because I do want to point out that one of our lovely actresses is here today,
Trudy.
Mary Portzer, who plays Trudy.
And she didn't get done. She was not get done.
We did rehearse in the whatever way was needed. So I did a lot of field trips with the girls. We went out. We went to wedding shows, like I forget what they're called, like not conventions, but you go to like a big stadium and they show you wedding dresses and wedding shows. I don't know what they're called. So we did that with them and hit a few bars with them. And then I was the only girl when we went out with the boys. I went out with the boys and hit a few bars with them. There's a lot of bars. And then with the older people, we had coffee.
Yeah.
With the mom and the grandma and all that, and then with the older men, like just hanging out, like I don't know, that was another. It was just like I needed to insert myself with everybody so they'd be comfortable with
And
me.
with each group, it was building that sense of family, because that's at the
And
end of the day,
tribalism.
that's what they are.
Mhm.
And that says
Other questions? Yes.
The fashion. The fashion is so good. I love it. It's so authentic. I have sisters that wore dresses like that, so I just want to ask you, what inspired that? Was that part of your life, just seeing the community, etc.? I just want to tell you, great job with the fashion.
Thank you so much. Somebody, the fashion, she's talking about the fashion, that's really cool. So somebody once said to me, wow, this is the most amazing movie about the 80s. It's like this period piece that's so vintage. I said, no, honey, we shot that. And this is what normal looked like.
We actually, there's a store, most of that fashion came from a store in the Bronx called Hot Stuff. Spelled for some reason with only one F. And they let me go in there, or our costume people go in there and grab stuff off the rack and take it, use it, and bring it back. And put it back on the rack.
Some people
Clean,
bought
of course,
used.
but yeah,
I don't think they let us wash it.
we had a lot of cooperation from the vendors. I mean, the tuxedos were promoted, the wedding gown was promoted, the bridal dresses, everything. The neighborhood kind of sort of participated. We got the neighborhood to be in on it.
It's one of the advantages of being a truly independent filmmaker, is that people get, oh, this isn't Hollywood. Actually, these guys are, who knows, maybe this movie will actually show on television someday.
Yeah.
Although, what's your favorite story of the guy walking down the street who said,
But there was a high standard in the Bronx at that time. We were shooting outside the deli, and this guy walked up to me and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, and I knew the guy, his name was Ray. And I said, "Ray, what do you want?" He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "We're making a movie." "Danny Aiello in it?" I said, "No." And he said, "Ah!"
How expensive was the Honeymooners footage?
The honeymooners furniture was ridiculously expensive. I mean, in relation to the other stuff. The only thing worse was the music. But the honeymooners, because you go to license the footage and then they give you a price and you're like, wow, that's a lot of money.
Per second, pretty much.
Yeah, they say, wow, that's a lot of money. And then they tell you, but you have to get permission from all the actors in the clip. And then it's like, oh, so you go to Gleason's estate and they say, well, we'll take whatever the same amount that Viacom takes.
Right.
And then you got to go to Audrey Meadows. Well, we'll take what Gleason takes. And you go to Carney and Carney. So yeah, it was very expensive.
Uh-huh.
But
So-
we again, we managed to sell the movie at a profit, and some of that profit had to go to pay some of those bills.
But the music rights and the TV were probably a big chunk of the budget.
The music rights were very big, yeah.
Uh-huh. What did you pay people, actors and crew? Was it kind of minimum wage?
Well,
or?
the entire above the line was deferred. So basically, we set, the way I did it was I set a day rate for the actors that was comparable to what the SAG rate was at the time. And we just kept track of days that they worked. And then there was a pool of money thankfully, that we did pay some of that out. And then, I don't know what we paid the crew. I tried to pay whatever was close to minimum wage. But I don't really remember.
And some of them had worked on movies before.
Oh, a lot of them
Yes,
had.
but what was wonderful is that the crew, why could we get this crew? And I think, people liked the script and saw that what we were trying to do, but also is that everybody was working like one step up from what. So the people who were assistants were coming up and doing, the actual role and stuff. So it was really like an opportunity, which is why we were very conscious, as much as we could, like to not abuse the situation, because we knew we wanted to keep everyone happy, because this was going to be everybody's calling card.
Had Lisa Rinsler shot a feature before? I know she worked in documentaries and some other things
She
before.
had shot a feature.
And Lester Cohen, the production designer, had done, I think, one other feature. But we knew him from film school.
Yeah. And as I said, sometimes you get lucky, when things gel.
We all ended up knowing each other. And I gotta say, having worked on your films and worked with your wife, with Maggie Renzi, who's here tonight, and please, I just want to say thank you to Maggie. Because Maggie, I learned so much from you, Maggie. I learned so much from you. It was the tone of a set, and the respect for the crew, and the respect for the actors, and the respect for the community that you're shooting in. That all of that was really what I didn't learn in film school that I learned on your set.
Yeah.
And then after going on your set, I went to some other movies where that was not happening, and I realized how lucky I was.
Yeah.
But that's what I realized, that is what I wanted to maintain.
Other questions? Yes.
Do you have anything coming up that we should know about?
At the
God, I hope so.
moment, we're trying. So we're hoping that all the excitement that's happening with these films can be parlayed into money
Yes.
for other
But there
projects.
is something that you should know about. I'm going to step away and do a little commercial here, if you don't mind, for a minute. You can't stream this movie. Thankfully, it will be out on Blu-ray, thanks to Kino Lorber, along with Dogfight and House of Saints in April. By the way, I don't believe you can stream Matewan at the moment.
Nope.
Right?
It's on the Criterion Collection, but that's the only place you can find it.
So one of the things that through House of Saints, House of Saints was what we refer to as a missing movie. Materials were missing, rights were confounded, and I will also again credit Maggie Renzi as being a leader in doing this work to track down films, get them back, get John's films back, and she sort of inspired us to start digging into this problem. And I'll just, being the former accountant, I'll give you the numbers. So I saw an article very recently that said, if you're a cinephile, you want to subscribe to Amazon Prime, they have 12,000 titles. Now, I don't know about you all here in LA, but in Manhattan we had video stores that had 60,000 titles. Netflix, when it was mailing out DVDs, had 110,000 titles. We've lost a lot of films in this whole streaming era. and there are many, many films that you cannot see for a combination of things, missing, unclear rights, missing materials, and it happens to a lot of films. Heartbreak Kid, if anyone's ever heard of that, Kiss of the Spider Woman, that's a missing movie. Until very recently, Mira Nair's Mississippi Masala, starring Denzel Washington, was
one print in the entire world.
yeah. So we've come together with a group of filmmakers, archivists, actually copyright attorneys, and we have an organization called Missing Movies, and this site is missingmovies.org. And two quick missions. One, to help filmmakers now find their films. And when those films go missing, by the way, the marginalized filmmakers are the first to go. Okay? Women, people of color, they're the first ones to go. And to help people find their films, we're hopefully going to put together a pro bono legal program because it's very expensive to find your film. Okay? And the second thing is an education program to help filmmakers now, if those movies you're making right now, today, will they be around in 20 years? Okay? So I have old school pamphlets. It's a pamphlet we've designed called Preservation Guide for Filmmakers, and it's also on our website. So you should just check it out, missingmovies.org. You'll be shocked at the number of films and films the titles you're
And it's partial because we don't know all of them, so we invite people to add to the list. It's huge.
Yeah, so many of the films that were made about this time, including a bunch of our films, were distributed by a company that then went out of business, sold their library to another company that then went out of business. And it could go on 3 or 4 companies. Yeah. They often ended up at MGM who didn't even know they had them.
Exactly.
And the prints might disappear and things like that.
And just remember that when these mergers happen and the sale of things happen, we're just a number on the ledger sheet. Nobody really knows what these movies are. Mm-hmm. So it's really up to us as film fans and film lovers to bring this awareness and let everyone know, and and start to agitate for the movies that you care about, and see if you can become part of. It's teams of people working together that will find movies.
Yeah.
And for the filmmakers in the audience, you have everything you need to preserve your film when you finish it, when you deliver it. You just have to organize that material, put it on the proper format, and get it to a real archive. And there are many archives around the country, and they'll happily take high-res copies.
And one of the things we're doing on our website, I believe it's under construction, so we're still working on it, but we want to have resources. So if you've got some stuff you want to archive, we're going to list, I think started to list places that will accept it. So it may not be that everyone will, but you just go through all of them and see who's going to keep your stuff, because you want to keep your stuff, you want someone else to keep your stuff, you want copies.
Yeah, and part of it is if you get distribution, you may be getting an advance, you may not, but you should have language in your contract that says you have to tell us if you're giving these rights to somebody else. We have to be informed for you to be allowed to do this. And then that person has that responsibility, because you may not be able to find your own film only 10 years down the road. Any other questions? Well, thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.